Welcome to the SQL Report Wizard, one of the cornerstones of the Wizard's Toolkit, the low-code development library. First, a quick review of what this video will cover, then we'll get into the technical how-tos. If you could write a good SQL SELECT statement, you could create full-featured reports in the Wizard's Toolkit. Features include sorting, filtering, center or right aligning columns, totaling, and more. If you also know how your website navigation works, you can then make those reports into comprehensive ways to navigate your website. Charts and graphs used to be complex and require lots of training, but with this library you could build them with a tiny bit of understanding in the click of a checkbox. All the complexity is handled by our library and its integration with ChartJS. Here's the topics of this video. First, we're going to go over who can use this, the SQL Report Wizard. Then we're going to do some report creation, basic feature demos, advanced feature demos. Then we'll go over the SQL tables used and the JavaScript files. Although the only thing you really need to know to be able to use this is the report creation, basic features, and advanced features. Here's a quick list of the basic features that we'll go over, and here's the advanced features that we'll go over. Who can use this? If you have Wizard's Toolkit, then this is part of your library of tools. If you don't have Wizard's Toolkit, you may want to review this as an add-on tool just so you can easily build reports quickly and easily. This could be added to any website as a standalone report builder and report viewer. Honestly, it allows your SQL developers to immediately provide analytics, reports, charts, and insights onto your website with no need for PHP programmers or any other web developers. If your team has SQL programmers or data analysts and PHP programmers, this can speed up your deployment time dramatically. In some work environments, the client makes a request, SQL analyst writes the SQL query and gives it to the PHP programmer, who then writes the PHP and gives it to the DevOps to deploy. Client sees report and wants minor change, which has to go to the SQL analyst, then PHP developer, then DevOps again. With the Wizard's Toolkit SQL Report Wizard, the process instead is SQL analyst logs into the website and builds a report, and it's done. Client makes minor change request and SQL developer logs into the website and makes the modifications. Immediate gratification. The SQL Reports Wizard is only accessible in the tech back office. Only staff with SQL knowledge should use this. The best way to teach is to do. Let's build some reports. Starting simple, then getting more elaborate using more features. After that, I'll dive into the code for those that want to understand why it works in addition to how it works. So here you can set the security level. If you want to have a report that is not visible to lower level people like customers or staff and only visible to managers, then you would set the security level to like manager. Then you set the type, and this basically just determines where it's going to show in the report viewer. You could choose the view order that it will be displayed in the report viewer and whether or not to hide footers. The page navigation is in the footer, so if you don't need page navigation because it's maybe an analytic report that only has 20 or less rows, you might want to hide the footer. The test mode, I'll show you that in a moment. Here you can put in whatever description that will be visible. Sometimes when you're debugging, you just want to see what columns are in a table. This isn't recommended for production, but is a cool feature. Now we'll save this report, very simple one-liner, and go to the report viewer. Here is the report types. I just put that one into demo, so you see it right here. By clicking on it, it brings it here. You see there's my description, there's the title. I can already export it to CSV or XML. And it brought in all the column names. It automatically puts a space before any capital letter. So if you have your SQL columns defined with uppercase and lowercase or with snake case, then it will automatically make it look very nice. Here's the actual table definition so you can see what it did. It excludes the unique identifier column if it is named UID, ID, or GUID, because generally you don't want those in reports. Remember I clicked the hide footer? One of the things that does is it removes the maximum number of rows per page on a report. So this is showing all the data in that particular table. Usually you won't want that. Usually you only want that for an analytic report. So let's change it. We'll remove the hide footer. Save, go back to the report viewer. Click on it. It shows the report down here. And now it only shows the first 20. This is a parameter that you can set in your PHP variables that will say how many rows you want to see in a browse list or a report, and then it automatically handles the page navigation for you. This of course goes to the end, that goes to the beginning, and there it is. Let's look into how test mode works. First we'll go back to the report viewer. Here are the different report types. If I go to core info, I can see there's a user history last few days. Click on it and it shows down here. But let's say we were still in development. So here's the user history last few days. And if we click on test mode, then what will happen is, one, it will stop being visible here. See, we no longer have user history by last few days, but it's still visible here. And if we click on it, the view, it will open in a new browser tab and it will show you what the select statement is. So it's actually working, but if we wanted to test it in our SQL program, we can also do that here, and then we can fine-tune and tweak it with indexes or whatever. Sometimes this can be really handy when dealing with a complicated SQL query. However, what I usually do is I will change the security level to programmer while I'm in development and not bother with test mode. And then that way it shows up in the report viewer, but only people that have a security level of programmer will see it there. Nobody else will see this particular report. Let's go over report viewer and report types. So this is the report viewer and we're using it currently in the back office. The back office is where the techs or programmers support a customer's website with error logs and email templates and e-commerce provider, everything that you could possibly need for supporting a website. But usually you'll want the report viewer to be available for a client or for their staff to be able to access in their normal website. This is a website with a completely different navigation, and you can see that the exact same code for the report viewer drops in very nicely. It's 100% data driven. So let's go back and look at the way it's constructed. First off, you do have access to the PHP, so if you want to make any modifications, you easily could, but most likely you'll never need to modify this file. But you can if you want. Let's assume that a client said that they wanted to have a new security level of sales department. They wanted to be above manager. So first off, almost all lookups are in the lookups table. So if we go sec, we'll find security level, and here we see it. So let's say we're going to make a new security level of 85 for sales department. We go in here, I hit the save and copy, 85, sales department. All right, now we have sales department, and if we go into here, we'll see the sales department. And now let's say they said we want to have a report type specific for the sales department. Again, you just go in here, and I created the demo one earlier, and I'm just going to do a save and copy. The lookup type is usually based on the column name. The lookup value, you can put anything you want. I'm going to put sales. The value is what will be saved to the data. The display is what will be seen in the drop list. So now if we go back to the report wizard, you can see there's now sales department. If I move it there, I'm going to change this to manager. No, I'm going to change that to sales department. Now if we go to the report viewer, it shows up here and no longer here. Likewise, in what we would consider the website for the client or the sales department. This is a great way to manage who gets to see which reports. Another nice advantage is if the person doesn't have that security clearance, let's say I'm going to temporarily lower my security clearance to manager. And now I don't even see the sales department because all the reports in the sales department report type are above my security clearance. I reset my security level, and now let's look at column alignments. First off, let's look at the current payments by e-commerce. You see everything by default is left aligned. Here's the SQL that's making it. We're using a count and a sum with a format. The column name is count. We're going to make this one centered, and we're going to make this one the amount right aligned. Now if we look at it, center, right aligned. Super easy. Now let's add some sorting. So first we're going to add sorting here and amount. Now notice it says one line per, columns to sort, header is optional, and sort by column, which is also optional. We'll get into that more in a moment. The help does show a lot of details regarding this capability. But first let's just see what happens if we do it like that. Now we look at this. And voila, we have sort capability. But if we do a sort on the amount, it's doing it like a string because of that comma. And so it's not actually in the correct sort order. So let me show you how to fix that. As the help says, there's 3 parameters. If you use only one parameter, then it uses the column name as what to sort, the header is going to use, and it's going to sort by that. If you use 2 parameters, then it shows what it's going to sort, the header, and it uses the first parameter as what it's sorting by. If you use 3 parameters, then it uses the column that is in your select statement, the column header you want, and the sortable column. All right, you can add an alias in the front if you have a complex select with an inner join, so you have multiple tables, and maybe you have the same column name in both tables. Then you can use the alias, but you don't have to if it is a uniquely named column. So let's look at it. Say we want to keep the name amount, but let's make a better amount for order by. We do not want to format it because having that comma in there is what causes the problem. So I'm going to make that the column we want to sort by, or the order by column name. Now we look at it, and now it sorts properly. Clicking on it a second time puts it in descending order, but of course we don't want to see that OB amount. So let's go back here. We're going to just add the OB amount to the suppress columns. Any columns that you list here will not be shown. Now it's not shown, but it is sortable. Here's another demo. In my pet demo table, I have the pet name and the city, the user, and I have the date of birth. And for this demo, I wanted to show the city, have the column header changed to town. We look at this again. We have first name as owner. And now if we look at the report, here we go. And you can see with a date format, it could really be strange on the sortable, which is why you have to use the third parameter for sorting. Because 2016 May and 2022 May, and this way it sorts properly. Now to see how easy it is to do totaling. We want to total the count, come down here, and we'll want to total the amount. We'll make the amount a money column total. Now if we look at this, there they have the totals. Now it's currently using the US dollar, and let me show you why. That's something that we define in the PHP in the WTK server info file. You have your Glow PHP local and your Glow currency code. This will be used for the number formatting in reports and all browse box creations. If we look at user activity, this one is a little more complicated. It shows the user and then has counts for login, page views, report views, and updates. And that has the total columns here and a line right here. I wanted to point that out because only the sortable columns has one line per, and all the others, because it only has a single parameter, are simply comma delimited on a single line. Like a line right, page views, logins, report views, and updates. Same with total columns, and that would be the same with the money columns. Let's look at the user activity report. It's under analytics, and here you see there's all the columns that are totaled and right justified. Often when you're making reports, you want to have them linked to PHP pages that you've previously made. So let's look at the pet demo. Here's our current report. And I know that I created a pet edit page for a previous demo. Here's the PHP. We won't go into the details in this video. And I want to make the report link to it. So let's go here. And down here under add link, I'm going to put demo pet edit. And by putting in the add link, it's going to add the add button. By putting the edit link, it will add edit buttons. Now notice we do have the unique identifying field up here, the UID, which does not show, but will automatically be used for edit buttons. So let's look at the report now. Now if we click on this, there's the add button. So if I want to add a new pet, let's go like this. We'll set the state. This is part of the USA state lookup data. We'll leave the rest out pretty blank. And look at that. There it is. It's already added. Now let's go and add an edit link. So we're going to copy this right there. With Wizard's Toolkit, 90% of the time you use the same PHP page for your add page as you do for the edit page. So we're going to come back here, we're going to list that. And now notice all of these have edit buttons. And there's our mad cat. Now notice when I hit save, it goes back to the pet list, and that's because the original pet edit page has the pet list demo as where it's supposed to go to upon saving. You could change that, of course, to have it go back to the report if you wished, but usually people want it to go back to the original listing page. Let's look at exporting. So if I go to the revenue list, here it is. And you'll see that there's already a export by default, where I can export this. I'm going to say save it to this folder. Well, if I pull it into Atom, we can see there it is, and it includes the UID column. So even though the report hides it because you generally don't want to see it on a report, the export definitely shows it. And of course, if I double click it, it opens in my favorite spreadsheet program, which I use Numbers since I'm on a Mac. And there it is. Beautiful. You can also, although it's no longer as popular as it used to be, you can also export into XML. If you click on there, there it is in XML. Now you might be wondering, what if I don't want to give my users the ability to export? So in the user administration, you can uncheck allowed to export, and then when the user goes to the reports, they can see the reports, but they do not see the export options. You may have noticed that you can also say they're not allowed to print, which makes it so they are not allowed to access reports from the report viewer. Instead, they get this, says contact your manager. Charts give a visual representation to your data, which bring your analytics to life. I've used a lot of different charting libraries and chose ChartJS to integrate with Wizard's Toolkit. The fundamentals of charting is you want to compare multiple groups of numbers against each other. In SQL, you do that with the group by. A bar chart, line chart, area, or pie chart all work the same way. They just represent the data differently. I've done all the complicated PHP, JavaScript, and HTML coding so you don't have to. Okay, let's look more closely at the Profit Monthly report. Up here we set the label of the main thing that we are comparing. Then we set the values that we want to review. And then I set a profit margin, did a little math there. Gross amount minus total cost divided by gross amount. And then set the group by. The group by is the most important, but this is not really a SQL lesson. This is about how to use SQL within Wizard's Toolkit. But you can see basically there's my group by with the year dash month, with the month being a 02 for February, so that it is before 03 for March. And then a limit 6, so we're only looking at the last 6. Down here at the charting, if you uncheck it, then you get the normal report. Looks nice. If you check it, you get the charting options. Textual is this thing with everything in visual text, and that is what is exported if you choose to export it. Bar chart, line chart, area chart, and pie chart. So let's look at those really quick. Notice the chart image versus the listing image. So these are list reports and that's a chart report. And you'll see that also if you go here. The chart reports have this little icon next to them. So now we see the bar chart, line, area, and pie. These are done with tabs in the materialized CSS. It's showing all of them. So we have total cost, total income, profit, and profit margin. Total cost, you see the tooltip actually says what the column is, total income, total profit, and down here is the total profit margin. Now if we want to remove that, we could just click this and it removes it, which gives us a little better representation. Let's switch to line chart. Again, everything has mouse over. Area chart is exactly the same as a line chart, except it fills the area with a color code. And then the pie chart, which has a donut view option. And again, you can click on parts that you don't care about. Say, let's compare everything except for February because February was a bad month or whatever. All right. So if we decided the pie chart really doesn't make sense, then what we could do is we come back here. I'm going to do like that so it's easier. Profit margin. We say let's remove the pie chart, and line and area is sort of redundant, so let's remove the line chart. And now we just have the report, the bar chart, and the area chart. But you know what? The profit margin really, it doesn't make sense because you're looking at a 57 value compared to a 8,539 value. So what we'll do is we're going to suppress that column. All right. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it down here, and just like these other columns up here, you do comma delimited if you want to have multiple on there. And now profit margin is no longer on there. It's that easy when you're using Wizard's Toolkit. So we show this to the boss, and the boss says this is great, but I'd really like to see profit yearly instead of profit monthly. So we're going to do a save and copy. Now that we have our perfect chart report, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change this to year. Change this to 3. I'm going to change this to just the Y. I'm going to leave everything else the same. We go back here. And now we have it based on year. It's that easy to take one good report and make multiple really impressive reports. Congratulations, you got to the advanced features. These are also pretty easy to use, but do require a little explaining. I am logged into the demo folder, which comes with Wizard's Toolkit, and you can see there's a lot of different demos here. We're going to look at the pet list, and this is what the pet list looks like. It's just some demo data, and you can see that there are a lot of options here. Let's look at the actual data. We have a fake email and a fake phone number, and a latitude and a longitude is actually in the data as well. So in the data you can see that we have a latitude and a longitude right there. And then here, if we click on any of these, it will bring up a send email modal window, a send SMS text modal window. This will allow you to actually make a phone call if you have Skype or any other VoIP type software on your computer. And then this will jump over to a Google map, passing in the latitude and longitude. And you may wonder, how complicated was it to do that? Super easy. Here's the pet list.php page. You're probably thinking, wait a second, I thought this was all about the SQL Report Wizard. Well, the SQL Report Wizard uses the exact same PHP function, WTK build data browse, as the Report Wizard does. So this is just another way to access it. In fact, if you wanted, we could copy and paste this into the Report Wizard and see how it works. I decided to make this text area to use Courier font, so it looks a little bit more like code. I want to remove the date of birth because we just don't need it for this demo. And now I have this in the Report Wizard. The beauty is we created a SQL function called fncContactIcons. And if we look at it, Here it is. It comes with Wizard's Toolkit. You can see that we're just passing in parameters of email, phone, latitude, longitude, whether or not you want to show the phone or not. The user UID, because that's passed to the SMS modal, so that we know who we're sending it to in the data. Whether you want to use modal email, and you can also even pass in an email code which will pre-fill the email with email template. You of course have full access to this function and can edit it in any way you like. See, we're using the modal here, and we say if it's not Y, then we just make it a simple mail to. In fact, let's make a couple of these changes right now regarding the show phone and the modal email. Show phone is right after latitude and longitude, and modal email is second to last. I'm going to move this over to demo. Save. Now you see it's not showing the phone number, and if we click on the email, it will call my email. And here's how it looked when it was showing the phone number. So that's just a simple parameter that you could choose. And let's also look at the email codes really quick. So let's say you wanted to have it throw in the welcome. So we'll just add that. That's the email code. And of course you can add as many of these as you want. Back in here. But it doesn't make sense to have an email code and not have it show up in the modal window. So let's change that to modal window. Now if we click on sending an email, it preloads the email with the welcome email template. You can see how this can be extremely useful for your client and staff. That way they can come in here and they can say demo code for report demo or whatever they want. They can edit this as much as they like, but they at least have a starting template to start with. And they hit the send and it sends it. When it sends it, it happens to also save it to our database for emails sent from within the system. But that's for a different demo. One last note, with Wizard's Toolkit comes lots of different functions from the SQL. We got contact icons, format phone, only digits. This is really useful for and is used internally for changing a formatted phone number into only digits, which you need when you're sending SMSs. Word caps, calculate distance. You pass in a latitude, you pass in 2 latitude and longitudes, and it will return the distance between the two as the crow flies. And then back to the contact icons. And of course, since they come with Wizard's Toolkit, they're all editable and you can modify them any way you want. Now we're going to go over a really easy one. Let's say that your boss or client wants to use a report that was previously done in PHP, like this very complicated or very cool looking income and money stats report, where they can choose the day, weekly, or yearly to see what their income was, and they can look at it as in chart form. And you also have the payment provider information. And you can use date ranges. So we put a lot of time into building this report, and then the boss says, I really want to be able to access this instead of in a separate menu. I want to be able to see it in my report viewer. All right, well, this is how easy it is to do that. You come here, you say, let's add a new one. We're going to call it Money Stats Demo. We're going to make it so only the owner can see it. We're going to move it to the demo folder. I want to make this at the top. We can skip the hide footer in the test mode because they'll be ignored. If you want, you can put in a description. And then here we put in the folder. And you actually put in the full extension, because you can have this actually go to a website outside of your normal domain if you want. Now when you tab off of that, it hides the rest of the fields because the rest of the fields are not utilized. So we're going to save that. You now see it up here. Pet list demo has no view order. That's why it's also at the top. We click on that, and now it shows it down here. So that is a very quick and easy way to add any report, even outside of your domain report, to your report viewer. Now let's look at some date filtering. All right, here is our regular date filter example. User history by date range. We have a user history table, which of course is linked to the user table. And right now I already have it with the add date for the history table based on start date and end date. And here's how we did that in the date filter options. First date, we put in the prompt. Second date, you put in the prompt. And you can either use this, or you could use the how many days before today feature, which I will show you in a minute, but you can't use them both simultaneously. So first let's just look at how is this working currently. You can see in here that we have it put in the start date, and we're saying is greater than or equal to, and is greater than or less than the end date. And this is in the core information for managers. So here is the information, and you can change the dates to whatever you want. When you click that, it filters. And it shows you all the information, and of course the page navigation works like usual. Now let's go back, and if we remove the second date, it still works, except then we would also have to remove this, which you can actually put in like that and comment things out. And now you see that the second parameter no longer shows, in which case you might want to change the prompt on that so it says from visit date. So that's how easy it is to change the prompts. But let's look at another option that we can do. Okay, we could say, let's say the boss says, I only want this to include people who started as of March 15th. Then we say, and we'll be using the end date, staff start date, and we'll change this to the user's add date. We're using WU for the alias on the user, so we'll say the user's add date is greater than or equal to end date, or is less than, oh yeah, we want to make it greater than or equal to end date. So let's change the staff start date to March 15th. And we'll refilter. You see I have some deleted users. Those were during a previous GDPR testing. But it is indeed showing only users that started after March 15th. In fact, if we look at the raw data, here are the users in the WTK users table. There's myself. I put in a start date of February 1st, and then Frank started February 2nd, and only the deleted people and Freddie started after March 15th. Now, if we go back to the report, even though the client or the boss said, hey, I want it by March 15th, you know he's going to change his mind later and say, can you give me a report based on those after February 28th or whatever, in which case this allows them to have the report be data driven where they can choose whatever staff start date they want. Sometimes the request is, give me a report that just shows me the data for the last few days. Very easy to do. Right here you put in default how many days before today, and then in your SQL you'll be using the days past token, and that will automatically be changed in the report based on the filtering. So here's how it looks in the SQL. You say where add_date is greater than or equal, date sub, interval, days past, and you can see that you could use this in any way, but this is the most likely way that you'll be using it. And this is how it will end up looking. Last few days, days before today. And right now there are 163, but if I change that to, let's say, a week, now there's 1070. Now often a client is going to say, yes, but I want to be able to filter by users or some other filter. In which case, this is how it looks, and let me show you how that was done. This is under user history filtering, and what I had done was I had copied the user history by date range to make this one. The drop table filter option is an extremely powerful feature that you can easily put in, and the top stuff I left the same, visit date and visit date. And here you can choose what data table to filter by. I'm using users, of course. The data ID column is UID. I'm displaying the first name. We could display last name or anything else you wanted as far as the column. I'm putting in a date filter. Because I put in the del date is null, that's why it is not showing these deleted ones, because they have a del date. I can put in other filters too if I wanted to hard code them, such as let's also include anybody with the first name of Freddie. And then when they use the filter feature of the drop list, it's going to send that back to the report builder as token report filter, and that will be changed, which you see up here saying and HUSERUID equals report filter. All right, so you might be wondering, how is this working if nothing's been put in? Because we have show all, and it's showing all of them, of course, all of the users for this date range, but we had a equals report filter. Let me show you the PHP. In your reports.php, we see if there's a value, then it's replacing it with the value. If there is no value, then it's replacing it with a -1. And that would be because it's assuming that it's a number. If there's a single quote around it, then it assumes that it is a string that you're looking for, in which case it is going to replace it with this squiggly WTK squiggly, which is 99.99% chance not going to be in your data, so it's going to find all of them. This is how it works when the person doesn't have a filter and you want to show all the data. Now, let's talk about how to enhance this for your own particular data need. If we go back here and we look at this, it actually explains it to you. You can add a table to filter results by. Add more table and lookups with lookup type cell table name. Access value chosen by users from data ID as report filter in your SQL above. Add more cell value column options here. The cell value column option is for this, and the cell table name is for this. So let's look at that. You can just click this and it will jump you right to cell table name. And currently we have WTK users and WTK lookups. Lookups is what you'll be using the most often, most likely, because here in the lookups table is where you have all of your cool lookups like staff role, security level, yes, no, 390 different lookups, which of course you can add as many more lookups and lookup types as you like. So let's look at a real demo. I started a revenue list with filter by ecom. This is just a copy of the revenue list, but I added in the RecomUID equals report filter. Now we need to add in the drop table option. Now currently we don't have that as one of the options. So we know that in here we have e-commerce. Here's our table, and payment provider shows the name, and of course we're using UID as a unique identifier. And if we look at our revenue demo data, we have an ecom UID right there, which has one of the ecom UIDs. Alright, so let's add in here, and again I'm going to use the save and copy. I'm going to put in the lookup value of the table name and the lookup display of the table name. Save it. Let's go back to the report wizard. And now, there it is. We're going to use the UID, and we're going to use the payment provider as what we want to display. And of course, we're going to put in the del date is null. That way, if later on somebody deletes one of the e-commerce data rows, it will not show up. Now, if we look at the report, it now has these options. Currently, you see all the payment providers are in here, and we can say let's look at only the checkout ones, and boom, done. Report filter tips and tricks. So we have this great revenue list with filter by ecom, and we know that it uses this logic to filter by ecom or the e-commerce provider. The report filter is passed to the reports.php using a report filter, RptFilter parameter. Here is a JavaScript function that can be called passing in a filter as the second parameter, and then it will pass it as a report filter. So let me show you how this ends up working. First off, we go back to here, and you can see what the report ID is. It's 10. And let's look at that in the raw SQL, which, since this is a SQL demo, you're probably more familiar with. We got select UID and report name from reports for report name like rev. And that shows that down here the UID is 10. Revenue list with filter by ecom. So we know this is number 10. Now you might remember the payments by e-commerce report. Nice and simple. Well, what if we wanted to make that so that it could link to the other reports? Okay, payments by e-commerce with links to other report. I have these linking, so now if I click on this, what it did is it called range 10 report filter 3. Report filter 3 being the WTK ecommerce.uid value, which brings us back to the revenue list with filters by ecom, and they're all checkout.com, and it pre-filled the filter by checkout.com because that's what I chose. So let's look at the code that actually called that. Here's the select statement. I did a concat onClick JavaScript report RPT, pass in the value of the report UID, and then as the second parameter, pass in whatever you want to filter by. And in this case, that's the e-commerce UID value. And then I'm showing the payment provider and then closing the href. Nothing else is needed in the filter special features, and the rest is the same regarding the count and the amount for centering, alignment, and totaling. So again, click on that. It shows it here. We say let's look at Stripe. It jumps to here. Using concat to add HTML or JavaScript calls to your reports empowers you to do all sorts of really amazing things regarding having your reports jump to other pages within your website, including jumping to other reports, passing in any parameter. You could have this also pass in a date if you wanted. Down here is a report filter JavaScript function, and this is really more used for PHP programming when you're building a form and you want to have it pass in the parameters to call the report, to call a particular report and pass it the filtering parameters. Let me know in the comments below if you would like to see demos regarding that. Now for the last and probably most powerful part of the demo, using a little concat and some HTML to allow you full navigation within the website. It's really quite easy. The revenue list will be a SQL report that you'll be able to find in Wizard's Toolkit, so you can just copy and paste as needed. Here it is. Let me explain how it works. ajaxGo is the primary navigation method within Wizard's Toolkit for going from one page to another. When I go like this, it just did an ajaxGo. When I go like this, it did an ajaxGo. And one of the ways that you can find out what the ajaxGos are is you can do a right click, and now I can see, oh, this did an ajaxGo. First parameter is the web page, including the path. Second parameter is the ID, and third parameter is the range. Now the ID is your unique identifier number. The range is the parent's unique identifier number. So for example, if we go over here to the user list, we see there are multiple here. And like this one, if we look at this, it's going to user logins. It's passing a 0 because you don't need an ID, you need a range. You want to see all the logins associated with this user. So the parent table is the user table, and it's going to show you all the logins. By passing it as the range, it then knows this is the parent table, and the page navigation then is always passing range as well. That way all the child data is related to the parent data. Let's look at the actual JavaScript, which of course you have full access to. Here is the function ajaxGo, passing in the page, then the ID, then the range. The other two parameters are special and you'll never need to deal with them. They deal with the back button. Sometimes you just want to see data without leaving the page, in which case you open up a modal window. This is the modal window where it grays out the background. Let me show you the JavaScript function. WTK modal, pass in the URL, pass in the mode. This is usually add or edit, and then pass in the ID and the range, same as before. You can also pass in a color if you want to change the color of the page. Now let's look at the actual SQL. So here's the concat, ajaxGo, user edit. I'm passing in the user UID. And then here's the first name, last name. I'm closing off, or then I'm doing a BR, and then I'm showing the email, which of course we could put in the fncContactIcons if we wanted. For the modal, we got this. On-click, JavaScript, WTK modal. Pass in the web page. You don't have to put in .php, that's assumed. Pass in whatever parameter you're using. I put in modal for the ecom edit. That way it knows when it's going to be editable versus when it's just going to be a modal for read only. Pass in the ID. And I'm not passing a range, so you can skip that parameter if you're not using it, and it will default to 0. And then this is what we want to display, and this is our alias. All right, let's look at how I picked one of the user pages. I went here, and I clicked here, and I was like, oh, I like this page. So I found out which page it was by doing a right click on it and looking at the HTML. And then I put that in, and now it calls it up. Now, as an added bonus, let's look at outside URLs. So for example, here is xe.com, my favorite website for doing money conversion. And if I put in some numbers, and I say Canadian dollar to US dollars, I can then look up here at the URL, and I see how they're doing it. They're passing the values as a simple query string. So what I did was I decided, you know what, I like that feature. And so I made it a link within my report. So now if I click on this, it will automatically convert 605 euros to USD and tell me that's 653 US dollars. Let's look at exactly the code used. Right here. I didn't want to show it if it's USD to USD because that's going to be always the same. So I did a simple if statement, and if it's USD I show nothing. Otherwise I do a concat and build with a target equals blank underscore blank. Then it will open in a separate tab like you see up here. And then it is passing in, we have the amount, here's passing in the gross amount, and the from, the original currency, and the to currency. For this report, I wanted to always just convert to USD. I also did an example in this for making a report. So since I noticed that we have a great report for number 22, so here we had this report. I see it's number 22. And I see this is how you filter it. So I added the 22 for the report and passed in the user UID for the filtering. Now you see down here we have this user logins, and this is how great it is. Once you have a web page, you can easily steal from your own web pages. I just right click on this, grab this, look at it, and say, oh, there's the user logins. Here's the user updates. Here's the user. So if I wanted to, I could easily grab any of these and do something like this. Say edit an HTML, copy the whole thing, go back here, jump into the report, paste it, and that's exactly what I did to put this user logins. And then I just changed the 7 to be user UID. I left this one at button floating, button small, just so you can see what it looks like in comparison to the one where I left it at just button floating. I'm not going to save this. Let's jump back over here. This is what the button floating looks like. It's round. And this is the button floating small. If you have any questions, add them in the comments below. Here's the WTK reports SQL table definition. This is the MySQL version. Wizard's Toolkit also works perfectly well with PostgreSQL. and we have all the tables for that as well. I expect it would also work with Microsoft SQL, but I haven't used it with Microsoft SQL in over 5 years, so we'd have to double check that. But let us know in the comments below if you need it for Microsoft SQL. Here is what the raw data is looking like from our reports table, and it's actually fairly intuitive, I believe. We got the report type, which is analytics, core, demo, sales. You have the report name, report notes, report select, and this is where you're actually saving the SQL. And then of course it's saving whether you want bar chart, line chart, area chart, or pie chart. Everything is being saved in this one SQL table. Now we do have the report counter table also, and this is just used to keep track of who is printing which reports. There's the report UID, there's the report URL, because sometimes you're going to an external URL, and there's a user UID, which is associated with the WTK users table that holds all your users. You could build a report to show you report views. We already have one that shows you a breakdown of which user, what's their staff role, how many logins have they done, page views, report views, and updates. Of course, you could add a date filter to this very easily. You as a SQL programmer have complete control of the values in the SQL results, but the totals are handled by the PHP library. So let me show you how that's done. The PHP local sets the number formatting, and this PHP variable determines the currency code. So right now you can see that it is in US and USD, US being commas for 1,000 delimiters and periods for decimal places. And then of course the $sign. This is the code that actually does the work, and it checks to see if you have the international number formatting installed for your PHP. If you do, then it uses it. If you don't, then it doesn't use it. By the way, if you use Docker, here's how you install the international number formatting. So let's see how this looks if I change it. You can see that puts the $sign at the back, but everything else is pretty much the same. Let's change this also. And as I mentioned, it doesn't change your result, your SQL results. It only changes the totals. So here you see it has spaces for the 1,000 delimiters, and it has a comma for the decimal delimiter. And here's another format option with the old euro there. PHP.NET, of course, has all the details on how to use number formatting. JavaScript is what makes charts amazing. But unfortunately, JavaScript can be very complicated. The good news is Wizard's Toolkit has integrated ChartJS 100% into the Wizard's Toolkit library, so you don't have to worry about any of the complicated part. You'll probably never need to look at the JavaScript at all, but I'm going to give you a very quick overview just so you know what it is in case you want to make any minor modifications like colors on your pie charts. WTK chart is where most of the complicated coding is for Wizard's Toolkit. And this includes things like toggling of the pie donut so that is automatically added. Same with the remove data set. WT colors just contains a color set so that you can use regular English words like deep pink or gold to describe your pie chart colors. WTK client vars is where the variable for the pie slice colors is defined. So here you can go in here and you can say, you know what? I know that the default is blue, red, and yellow, but let's change this to gold and pink. And now I'm going to open this up in Chrome. Let's do a hard refresh. And now we see gold is the second color and pink is the third color. It's that easy for you to change the colors to whatever you prefer for your pie charts. Lastly, of course, is the ChartJS file, which we're using the 3.8.2 version, and we've included both the regular and the minimized version inside Wizard's Toolkit. There are 3 example files in the demo folder that you can look at if you're really curious as to the PHP or the HTML or the JavaScript that is required to make these charts, although in reality you'll never need those because you're using the SQL Report Wizard, which makes it all super easy. All you need to know is how to write a good SQL statement. Being able to log into the secure back office of your website and create dynamic data-driven reports using only SQL, it makes it so when the boss or client asks for a new analytic or report, you can provide it immediately. No time delay because we need to deploy files to staging and then to production web servers. All is 100% data driven. No time delay because we need to deploy files to staging and then to production web servers. All is 100% data driven. If there are any other features you would like us to add to the SQL Report Wizard, let us know in the comments below. Subscribe for more on the business of programming.